the Russia leading with a nuclear weapon is low. I think that what we would probably see before that is even if the U.S. doesn't, I'm sorry, even if Russia doesn't launch this big arrow movement, but the U.S. does allow the long-range weapons to be fired into Russia, I think that the first response would be a conventional response from Russia into a NATO area where all these weapons are being marshaled, where the ammo dumps, where all these things come in off the aircraft or from trains from elsewhere in Europe that they get stored before they get brought into the Ukraine. I think those would be taken out. I think that they would hit some number of them in direct tit-for-tat retaliation, because that's what they're apparently going to claiming that they're going to target in Russia if they allow these long-range weapons to come in there. So I think that first you would see a conventional response that, of course, would automatically trigger Article 5, because that's how the Article 5 works. And then I think that the West would be faced with, do you escalate further? Because if that's the case, and this is another reason why I think that Putin specifically mentioned large numbers of strategic aircraft, large numbers of missiles, large numbers of drones. He didn't specify coming from where. He's talked about a nuclear and non-nuclear states working together. I mean, that sounds very much like that is on his mind there. So if he fires a conventional weapon into a NATO state in response to this, and then they start doing anything in return, now then, again, he may say that does threaten my security, even if they're not nuclear weapons, and firing one in return. And then we're right back into this literal Armageddon type mutually assured destruction position here. That's where this is at right here. And listen, even if anybody thought, well, I bet we can just keep it on this side of the nuclear line and just wage a conventional war. Now, why would you want to do that? Number one, why would you want to try and skirt a nuclear weapon falling in your lap? Why would you even want to do that? But second, you can't, okay? Russia has spent the last probably year and a half, closer to 2 years, completely retooling its industry so that it can manufacture all the weapons, ammunition, tools of war, everything else that it needs, drones, missiles, rockets, literally everything they need to fight a war. They're now doing it, cranking out 24/7, 365. They're getting it all. We haven't even started. We've given a handful of contracts to slightly elevate some of the percentage of some of the weapons that we're using. We're on nowhere near a war footing. If we got into a conventional war with Russia, it would hand all the advantages to them, or else cause us to have to do like the Russians and the Ukraine side did when this war started in the first place, and then spend years with an S to continue to fight a static kind of relatively low level war of constant destruction back and forth while we got everything ginned up. But then, of course, the Russians would be ginning up even further because they're on a wartime mobilization right now, but they could go much higher, and they could force mobilize millions of their men, which they haven't done so far. And then you could be right back again where you're in Armageddon, where somebody's going to have to decide between either losing conventionally or using a nuclear weapon. And if you get conventionally nuclear armed forces trying to fight a conventional battle, again, you just keep circling back to this. The chance that it doesn't go nuclear at that point is, in my view, non-existent. So all of those negative possibilities, there's not one that's a positive outcome. If you somehow manage to stay on the conventional side of a nuclear war and it doesn't escalate in there, there's no good outcome for the West. If you surrender and say, for the Ukraine side, and say, we can't win this, that's the only possibility. That's not good, but it is the least bad of all of them. And the West, recognizing the significant risk that we're talking about facing here, should absolutely do that. You want to put a good face on it, and you want to say whatever you want to say in public, whatever you have to do. As long as what's happening behind the scenes and with your actions are, we're winding this deal down. You need to make the best deal, Zelensky, you could get. We'll take care of you and your family. We'll give you a place. We'll give you security, whatever. But you're going to wind this deal down because we're not going to risk war. That's what should be happening. That's what should be happening when he meets Biden tomorrow in private, where no cameras are around. That's exactly what Biden should tell him. It's time to wind this down. We ain't going any further. There's no value whatsoever for the West to even risk finding out if Putin is bluffing or not. There's no value to it at all. Even if you found out he was bluffing, what does that gain to you? Nothing, except it may be a conventional war, which has its own risk. And again, as I point out, they always circle back to the potential nuclear use after that. So why don't we just do what's the normal, rational, logical, moral, sane thing? Bring this war to a conclusion, and let's move on with the rest of our lives